Hello everybody, and welcome to a Hollywood Lives and Legends special presentation. It Conquered Hollywood, the story of AIP. AIP, of course, is American International Pictures. Now, in the history of Hollywood, AIP was unique. They were formed in the 1950s, and AIP was the first studio to realize that a gold mine could be made from teenage audiences. I know, today it just seems like common knowledge. So what they did is the company produced rock and roll musicals, horror films, and dramas about adolescent angst. And along the way, AIP gave career boosts to directors like Francis Ford Coppola and Martin Scorsese, and actors like Jack Nicholson and Robert De Niro. You know, American International's films were always great fun. They always made a lot of money, too. Here is It Conquered Hollywood, the story of AIP.
You knew that you weren't making, that you weren't making great works of art. I mean, that wasn't the goal of these. Were you?
Why, I dare say you're wrong.
I went to see a director once, and hoping to get a job from him, I said, I've been very active with American International, and I'm looking to move on to bigger and better things. And he just looked at me and said, I don't think we could use you.
Nobody was trying to make a great movie. It's not a question of, gee, is it a great story? Do we have great performances? Does it look professional enough that we can play it in our theaters without our patrons tearing the seats apart in anger?
You know, in lieu of money, when you don't have money, somehow you come up with creativity.
Bedlam. They looked for Bedlam. We drove around the city looking for mayhem.
I mean, this is the way it was, and you could probably do it in your own garage if you knew how.
I think they tapped into a teenage audience that wasn't looking necessarily for a good movie.
I love you.
Don't you, I love you, me.
It'll have the same effect chemically as a surgical prefrontal lobotomy.
They're classics. They are classics.
Even though these pictures were made sometimes in 5 days, and they weren't cinematically, shall we say, too sophisticated, AIP had really brought a whole generation of viewers back to watching movies and turned into movie fans.
Tell us who you are.
I'm Samuel Ziarkov, just a farm boy from Iowa. I'm a lawyer, I'm a producer, and God knows what. Although there are some people who say bastards, which I'm not.
Sam Arkoff isn't the most famous producer in Hollywood. He and his partner, Jim Nicholson, don't have streets or boulevards or movie houses named after them. And they sure didn't win any Oscars. In fact, most movie fans have little or no idea who they are. But the movies we watch today might be very different had it not been for these two oddball movie dreamers who discovered Hollywood's most valuable audience and went on to produce more pictures than David O. Selznick, Jack Warner, Sam Goldwyn, and Louis B. Mayer combined.
They started basically with just a basic drive-in movie, car hop movies. Then they went from that to horror films. Then they went from that to beach blanket films. And then they went from that to exploitation films. And they did all this in about a 7 or 8 year period of time where they changed entire genres. But they knew how to release a movie. They knew how to mass produce a movie.
When Sam and Jim met in 1955, both were looking for a new direction. Sam was a lawyer who dabbled in television, and Jim was a promo guy at Real Art Pictures. And when Sam managed to squeeze a cash settlement out of Jim's tough boss, Jack Broder, Nicholson was immediately impressed.
Jack Broder wrote me out a check for $500. And Jim Nicholson's eyes lit up. And he told me later, he said, I have some plans myself, and I think you'd be the proper guy to do them with.
And so, with no experience making movies and less than $3,000 in the bank, Sam Arkoff and Jim Nicholson began American International Pictures.
Sam was the businessman. He was the one that kept the books and made sure that the pictures came in on budget. And Nicholson was the one that came up with the titles and the ideas for pictures and hire somebody to make the film. So Nicholson was always considered to be the creative person on the team, and Sam was the businessman. I think they were probably both a little of each.
Starting up in the 1950s, Sam and Jim couldn't have picked a tougher time to make it in Hollywood. The studio system was crumbling. The majors had lost their theater chains thanks to a Supreme Court antitrust ruling, and they were losing their audience thanks to an innocent-looking piece of furniture that sat in the corner of the room.
Television had devastated the motion picture industry by about 1954-55. More theaters were closing up. People were staying at home in droves. Movie companies were selling their movie chains.
Of the 21,000 movie theaters in the United States, 7,000 would close by the end of the 1950s. Movie companies were cutting back the number of pictures they made each year, spending more on their expensive A films to win back the TV audience and producing fewer low-budgeted B films. But while everyone at the top was in a panic, Sam and Jim saw their opportunity at the bottom.
Nicholson and Arkoff saw that, hey, this is our chance to step in and produce pictures at a modest price that we can slip into, the theaters when you can't get a big film. Hey, you can get one of our pictures.
The problem was Sam and Jim didn't have any pictures. They didn't have any scripts, and they barely had any money. And then they met a young man who gave them exactly what they needed.
My name is Roger Corman, and I'm a filmmaker.
Roger Corman was just beginning his legendary career as a low-budget filmmaker. He'd made a road racing picture called The Fast and the Furious. And even though Sam and Jim didn't have a credit to their name or a dime in their pocket, they convinced Corman that they were the guys to distribute his film.
My first impression of Jim and Sam was that they were two very bright and ambitious men, just a little bit older than I was, and I thought it would be worthwhile to gamble with them.
The gamble was mostly Sam and Jim's. They persuaded Corman to let them borrow his picture for 30 days. In return, they promised to let him make 3 more pictures for $60,000 each. Now, all they had to do was find the money.
Jim Nicholson got on a bus with this picture that Roger Corman had made and showed it to a bunch of exhibitors and said, we can make more pictures of this caliber, but we need some advance money so that we can make more pictures, because Nicholson and Arkoff didn't have a dime between them. And that was how they got started.
Okay, this'll be a take.
By charming the notoriously tight-fisted exhibitors into financing their first package of movies, Nicholson and Arkoff had pulled off the near impossible. Now they had an even tougher challenge: to get their movies made.
Roll up. Lay back.
Movies can be made for almost any price depending upon what you want to put in them. We didn't have those honey wagons, for example. We were shooting on location. We would find the nearest gas station and use the gas station. And at noon, you didn't have a big cock-a-doodle-doo. That way, you went to the hamburger shop or the whatever it was. That's what you did, because the essence was to make a picture, not to have a good time.
In the late 50s, the average Hollywood movie cost around $6 million. With the money they'd squeezed out of the exhibitors, Sam and Jim had around $60,000, which left Roger Corman with just about the toughest job in town.
We shot Little Shop of Horrors in 2 days and a night. Bucket of Blood in 5 days. The average was about 10 days, simply a 2-week schedule for most of the films.
It was said of him, I think, the Daily Variety, that he could produce a film in a phone booth for the price of a call to New York and complete it before his 3 minutes were up. Roger was fast.
Roger was a walking one-man studio, the only one I think ever to be in Hollywood since Mr. Capra.
I always thought it was just a sailor's tale, but it's true.
Let's get out of here.
With Corman leading the way, Sam and Jim began their assault on Hollywood with 8 movies in their first year of business. The philosophy was simple: make 'em fast, make 'em cheap, and don't sweat the small stuff.
4 days, 5 days, 6 days, what? I mean, we did a picture in 7 days. We worked hard and fast, and we all were good. And the pictures hold up.
There was no such thing as a lunch. You had a box lunch. They gave you an apple and a sandwich and a root beer or something like that, or a little cup of milk. It was like when you were in school.